Hey guys, so here's what we're going to do today. We are taking on the next question for the week that's coming out of the book Cornerstones. And so if you don't have it, that's fine. You can track along with us. I'm just making these videos, usually picking like one that are on the couple pages for the week. So here we go. We're going to be asking of how was Jesus born? Okay, so this is something that if you've been in church at all, you know the story, right? You know the story that of Jesus coming through his mother, the Virgin Mary, in the story, and finds to be with child. But let's just talk about that for a second. There's a couple things I want to bring up. That when you dig into this a little bit, these are some of the things that you'll find. So let's deal with the first part. Okay, let's get the answer, and then we'll talk. Hopefully you brought your coffee, and we can have a discussion. By the way, this is one of those ones that, depending on the age of your kid, you may not actually be ready to talk about the specifics behind this, but just that they drill in the fact that we know from the Bible that Mary has not been married, and she asked that question, how can it be? I'm not married, all of that. And so those are things that you could probably do. But if you want to go a little bit deeper, you got older kids, this is a good conversation to have because really we're talking about the impossibility of the virgin birth. And so often people say, well, it's impossible. We're not going to, I don't believe it. So let's deal with that, right? So the answer that they give us in the Cornerstones book is, of course, is this. It's very simple of how was Jesus born? Jesus was born of the Virgin Mary. Okay, so pretty simple, straightforward. Let's talk about it. Do you understand that just it's impossible, right? That's why so many people reject it. In fact, if you look at history of where people have kind of stopped, some of the first things to go when you begin to fall away are things like this, right? Because you begin to look at the world around you and you say, yeah, this stuff doesn't happen. Virgins don't give birth, right? In order to give birth, there must be sexual intercourse for that seed to be planted within that egg, right? So that's the stuff that most people say, this is impossible. There's no way it could happen. Now, here's what I want to do, though. I want to look at some of the verses, right? Because I do believe that if you believe in the God who could part the Red Seas, even go back to just the very beginning, verse 1, chapter 1 of Genesis, right? God creates everything. If you believe that, is it possible for him to allow a virgin to bear children? Okay. And that's where I just, absolutely. And so I don't think it's easy to just throw that out. I know for some people, that's the point, right? Is I can't believe it. It doesn't happen today. We throw it out. But there are certain things in the Bible that God comes in and does things that are miraculous to prove his word, right? You think about some of the things that Jesus did. No normal person could do them. But when miracles do take place, oftentimes those miracles are to confirm what God has been saying to show, like, here's a sign to let you know that everything I've been saying has been true. And you see that actually in the prophetic literature. So obviously when we talk about the virgin birth, you got to look at Isaiah, right? So Isaiah 7:14. Now this is important, right? Because this also gives us instructions on how to deal with biblical prophecy. And so here's the deal. The prophets, when they gave signs, a lot of times we kind of read the prophets as if it's miracle here, miracle there, all the way, all that kind of stuff. But here's the deal. Most of the time when it comes to biblical prophets, the miracles are not taking place all the time. In fact, some of that stuff, if there's going to have something, is usually going to come after the word has been given to give a sign. So when you read something like that, right, in Isaiah 7:14, therefore the Lord himself will give a sign. See, the virgin will conceive and have a son and name him Emmanuel. So we're looking at the 720 time frame, 720 BC, right? 700 years plus before Jesus. And you see that. And so that's actually quoted and that's given. And that's what is, when you look at in the New Testament, about why we make a case for that. That's part of this, right? Is Matthew especially will quote and say that this is why, is because this is what was already given in the book of Isaiah. Let me show you some notes. I'm going to bring you up to my text so you guys can see that, right? So a couple things we need to recognize. Look, Matthew sees that the birth of Jesus is the fulfillment of Isaiah, okay? That all of this was to take place because of that. Now, I want to go back, and I also want to look, okay, like if you go and you look and you'll see in the book of Luke, right? In the book of Luke, you'll see in Luke chapter 1, Mary asked the angel, "How can this be? I have not had sexual relations with a man." The angel replied to her, "The Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. Therefore, the Holy One to be born will be called the Son of God." And so even in the book of Luke, there's an understanding that Mary was a virgin and she was going to give birth to Jesus, okay? So Matthew sees the virgin birth as a fulfillment of Isaiah. We know from the exchange in the book of Luke that she is that she was literally a virgin. And we also know that, like, if you actually read the book of Matthew too, right? If you go here, notice like this is problematic for Matthew. Matthew finds that she's been pregnant, and he doesn't know what to deal with it. And so, as any normal person, right? Any normal person says, "Okay, I gotta drop this. I can't handle this. This isn't true. This isn't real." And it takes an act of God sending him an angel to confirm that. Now, here's the deal I want to bring up, okay? Because it's very, very clear, New Testament standards, that it's very clear that the New Testament affirms the virgin birth of Christ, right? Now, let's talk about, though, what's often brought up is the Old Testament piece, right? Because the Old Testament piece, people will often say, well, okay, that passage in Isaiah doesn't really mean virgin. So I want to show you two things that I think it's interesting, food for thought, when we talk about the Isaiah passage. And so if you will, head over to Isaiah 7, because I think this is important to look up. So here's what's interesting in Isaiah. I'll show you in my notes here. So right here, this is interesting. So that the context of the book of Isaiah is that there's these kingdoms are about to try to fight in the southern kingdom in Judah. They want to get rid of the king. He's a wicked guy in the first place. But God sends Isaiah to go and say, "Hey, I'm going to send you to go to King Ahaz, and I'm going to tell him, like, hey, I want you to know that it's going to be all right." Now, notice in here, in the text right here, here's what it says. The Lord spoke to Ahaz, "Ask for a sign from the Lord your God, as deep as Sheol or as high as heaven." So in the context of this virgin birth prophecy, God tells him, you can ask me for anything. The highest heights to the lowest lows. It can be incredibly massive, right? There is no extent to the sign you will ask. So I can confirm to say, stand strong, I'm with you. That's what's in the context here, right? Stand firm, God's with you. These other kingdoms are going to fall apart. If you just read the first 9 verses, you'll see that. So God says, you can ask me for the grandest of signs. Ahaz replies, "I will not ask. I will not test the Lord." Now, this guy was wicked. He was into child sacrifice, all sorts of things. So I highly doubt that he really meant that. He just didn't want to bother with this. And then Isaiah says right here, Isaiah said, "Listen, house of David, is it not enough for you to try the patience of men? Will you also try the patience of my God? Therefore, the Lord himself will give you a sign. See, the virgin will conceive and have a son and name him Emmanuel." Now, if you go on and you read 7, 8, and 9 in Isaiah, there is some confusion. I want to be honest with you. As you talk about, there is some confusion sometimes between, was he talking about that sign, was the virgin to give birth then? And was it just to be a sign that by the time this kid's born, these kingdoms are gone? When you read 7, 8, and 9 together, it seems very clear that we're talking about somebody, this Emmanuel that's going to be talked about, who is coming in the future. It's very clear we're talking about an individual who's headed our way, but he's not here yet in the book of Isaiah. Now, here's what else is interesting, right? So this is often brought up. So for instance, if you were to look and to say, okay, well, what is the word virgin behind this text? The word virgin behind this text is, and let me find I'm going to just pop it open for you. I don't know where it's at. Okay, here we go. I'll just do this for you here. So if you look at this and you see like, what is the word, the original language? Here's what that word is, right? It just means a young woman. Now, honest truth is it can mean young woman, it can mean virgin as well. It can use interchangeably. There would have been a more specific word if Isaiah was wanting to mean a virgin specifically, but he uses that word. So some will also say, see, Isaiah's sign is just that the young woman's going to give birth. Now this is what I think is so interesting is, right, God has just said, ask me for whatever sign you want. Think about this sign. Here's the sign for you. A young lady's going to give birth. Okay? Who's not giving birth, right? I mean, that's not really a sign. Thank you very much, right? So I think in the context as well, you have to recognize like God is doing this in the context of ask me for the grandest sign, and I'm just going to give you one. And I think when he talks about, oh, house of David, he's giving it to the dynasty, to the kingdom, right? Not to Ahaz, because he's rejected that. That's my opinion on that. Now, here's what I also find is super, super interesting. Okay, so in the Hebrew, he uses that word to say young woman, right? And it can be young woman, it can mean virgin, right? Now, in our English, we translate it as virgin. Why? Well, two reasons why. The New Testament translates it as virgin, and they talk about it like that. And the reason they do is if you were to open up a Greek translation, remember, we're looking at a Greek translation of this is probably 200 years prior to Jesus, when the Greeks translated that passage. Now remember, this is understanding. This gives us insight into the way that they interpreted, the tradition of how they interpreted. They use this word right here. And when they use the word that they translate for women, they use very, very specific language of a virgin. So that tells us that 200 years prior to Christ, and probably even all the way up behind that, you are looking at specifically somebody who was to come, and they were talking about this and knowing this, that God was going to give a sign one day, and a virgin literally would give birth. So this is why I think when we go through this, I think the text shows us this stuff is important. It's miraculous. Yes, it's hard to grasp. I don't quite understand all of the mechanics and how that, but it's a miracle because God's involved with it. And so I think that you need to, as a Christian, get to a point where you say, what is the text evidence? Show me. And this is something that I just don't think you can right away. You can't just say, well, I don't believe in the virgin birth. I think that's problematic, right? The evidence is there that the New Testament affirms a virgin birth. The Old Testament affirms a virgin birth. And we've got to come to terms with that. And I believe it. I don't quite get it, but I believe it. And so that's for today. I want you to think about that. I hope that's helpful for you because I know there's probably a lot of things out there you can read. It's a really debated passage, especially Isaiah 7. But what's not debated is the New Testament understanding of it as well. So hope that helps. Hope it's not too technical on some of those pieces for you. Text me, email me, write a comment down if you have questions on this. But I hope that's helpful. Like I said, I think this could be a little bit weightier, more for some of the older side to talk about. But it's really cool. If you go through the rest of this week, by the way, if you look through the Cornerstones book, they're going to talk about why was he supposed to be born of a virgin too? Like that's a really deep question, but one that I won't answer until next year as I'm going through this again. Go figure. Okay, that's it for now. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.